Coming up next on the Blast Radius, we've got this week's Decline of Western Civilization news roundup, including your obligatory Jamal Bowman fire drill. We've got this day in history. We're going to unpack the Battle of Midway, its strategic implications, and how different things might have looked if it played out just a little bit differently. From the extraterrestrial intelligence desk, since we have such an acute shortage of intelligence here on Earth, we're going to talk Fermi Paradox and what the hell the answer might be. And finally, from the interstellar interloper's desk, we are going to wonder out loud what in the living hell Oumuamua is and whether it qualifies as an illegal alien. All that and so much more coming at you next in the following 90 minutes. Jim Eagle, hit the intro. From high atop the battlements of Castle, my green screen just broke in half, where you'll find lots of public artworks, and none of them is a giant man-eating anus, which I guess makes us less cultured than Palm Springs. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America and all ships at sea. Welcome to the Blast Radius. Here is your Decline of Western Civilization news roundup for the fourth and final week of September 2023. Dateline Ottawa. Monday, 25 September. According to a new survey from the Angus Reid Agency, 67% of Canadians stand in opposition to the mandated use of gender-neutral pronouns and terminology in government documents and communications. Reached for comment, Prime Minister Trudeau said, quote, "Can't talk now. I still haven't finished cheering for the Nazis," close quote. Dateline London, Tuesday, 26 September. In an interview with The Telegraph, British actress Kathy Tyson asserted her firm belief that calling someone woke is, quote, "just as bad as using an offensive slur," end quote. Tyson went on to say, quote, "The terms woke and race card are deeply offensive to me. Race card gets thrown in your face if you make a criticism of anything, and woke is used to undermine progressive ideology. Even the term white privilege is very, very divisive, and I'm not about sides," close quote. And then, without missing a single beat, Tyson went on to say that when she was younger, she never would have agreed to talk to a conservative news outlet. So I guess self-awareness is also on the list of things she's not a very big fan of. Dateline Philadelphia, Wednesday, 27 September. Organized mobs of looters rampaged through the city of brotherly love this week, smashing windows and stealing merchandise from a series of retail outlets, including Foot Locker, Lululemon, the Apple Store, and pretty much any place that happens to sell alcohol. Asked to comment on the wholesale breakdown of civil society and rampant violent criminality taking place in his home state, Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania said, quote, "Can't talk now. I have to go shopping for some big boy pants. Being a senator sure is oppressive. All of a sudden they want me to dress like I have an office job or something," close quote. Dateline, Northumberland, England, Thursday, 28 September. The world-famous Hadrian's Wall Sycamore Gap tree, which was voted England's best tree in a 2016 poll, because apparently there are polls for such things, was cut down by some asshole with a chainsaw this week in an apparent act of senseless vandalism. Reached for comment, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said, quote, "While the tree may be gone, and that's obviously quite tragic, I think it's more important now than ever to keep in mind that trees should always be referred to with non-binary gender pronouns. We're all going to miss the Sycamore Gap tree and all the joy that Z-Zimzer brought into so many lives," close quote. Dateline, Washington, Friday, 29 September. Representative, complete idiot, and congenital liar Jamal Bowman of New York, in an apparently desperate attempt to forestall a congressional vote on a bill that Democrats didn't like, registered his displeasure by intentionally triggering, in full view of a surveillance camera, a fire alarm at the U.S. Capitol, resulting in the evacuation of the building and a full response by local emergency services personnel, a criminal act that is punishable by up to 6 years in prison. Reached for comment, fellow complete idiot and congenital liar Jussie Smollett said, quote, "Wow, that guy is really, really dumb," close quote. And that's this week's Decline of Western Civilization News Roundup. And I don't have any co-host to kick it back to this week because certain people are in the YouTube penalty box. So let's just welcome whoever happens to be here and commenting. Swiss Miss, good to see you. Glad you could make it. Thank you for the big red heart. And I think if the producer wants to put something else on...
Tactical nuke incoming!
Welcome back. Time for this day in history. Just waiting for the prompter. It'll be along any second now. 331 BC. In one of the greatest victories in one of history's most distinguished military careers, Alexander the Great defeats Darius III of Persia in the Battle of Gaugamela. 1814, the first session of the Congress of Vienna is held, in which the great powers of Europe begin redrawing the map of the continent after the defeat and vanquishing of French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte, never imagining that they'll just have to defeat him again in less than 1 year's time. 1890, Yosemite National Park is established by an act of Congress, and within 5 minutes, rock-climbing dirtbag stoners begin trying to live at the place for free all year round. 1903, on the strength of an inside-the-park home run from Jimmy Seagring and 6 shutout innings from Deacon Philippe, the Pittsburgh Pirates defeat the Boston Red Sox 7-3 in Game 1 of the very first World Series. Reached for comment, losing pitcher Cy Young said, quote, "What do you want from me? I'm going to end my career with 315 losses. How upset do you want me to be about this one?" Close quote. 1908, the Ford Model T goes on sale at a list price of $825. Reached for comment, Delaware Senator Joe Biden says, quote, "We need to ban these horseless carriages immediately or climate change will kill us all by 1920. Close quote. 1938, pursuant to the terms of the Munich Agreement signed on the previous day, Nazi Germany begins its occupation and annexation of the Czech Sudetenland. Reached for comment, British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain says, quote, "That Mr. Hitler seems like an honest fellow. I'm sure he won't make any more territorial demands after this one." Close quote. 1957, the motto "In God We Trust" first appears on U.S. paper currency. 56 years later, during the Joe Biden administration, the motto is amended to read, "In God We Trust," that this money is still actually worth something when we're through with it, close quote. 1964. The free speech movement is launched during a rally on the campus of the University of California, Berkeley. Reached for comment, current-day Berkeley students were clubbed about the head and shoulders by the campus censorship police before they had a chance to say anything. 1971. Walt Disney World opens in Orlando, Florida, and in a shocking display of arcane, non-enlightened backwardness, none of the employees is a hairy fat man in a dress. And that's this day in history for this Sunday, the 1st of October, 2023. Back to you, anonymous co-host who doesn't exist, so I don't even know who I'm kicking it to. Let's go back to the comments, shall we? Thank you, Swiss Miss. You are an incredible sweetheart, as always. All right. Let me just get the prompter situated here, and we can go straight into the Midway segment, I believe. I hate dead air. There's nothing worse than dead air. All right, just a moment here. The dead air will end in 5, 4, 3, 2. 5, 4, 3, 2. Now, we talked just briefly 2 weeks ago about the Battle of Midway, and we were supposed to talk about it last week, but we got sort of preoccupied with other things. And I still want to talk about it since it's something I've been giving a fair deal of thought to recently, particularly since I have just finished reading Shattered Sword by John Parshall and Anthony Tully, which is the authoritative work on the subject and has been ever since it came out a little over 15 years ago, and which it will very likely continue to be for many years into the future because the book is just that good and that thorough, and especially for its reliance on the Japanese sources and its focus on the Japanese perspective on the battle and the larger war, which are things that have been previously fairly lacking in the English language works that Western historians have done on the matter, and it resulted for a long time, perhaps not surprisingly, in a standard narrative that was skewed far too much toward what the Americans did right and not so much toward what the Japanese did wrong. And it was that narrative that mostly informed the Midway movie from 1976, the one with Henry Fonda and Chuck Heston and Hal Holbrook and so on. And thus, that was the version of the story that wound up implanting itself in the American public consciousness. And the way that narrative went was the Americans were on the ropes. We were the plucky underdog. We were outnumbered and outgunned. The Japanese, they'd been kicking our ass up one side of the Pacific and down the other for 6 months straight ever since Pearl Harbor. And then by a stroke of serendipity, our guys cracked the Japanese naval code, so then we could read all of their intercepts, and hence we knew exactly where and when they were going to attack. We knew the size and disposition of their forces. And it was just a matter then of lying in wait and springing the trap on the 4th of June, 1942. And it's a nice story for movie screenplays and popular history books and so on, but as is always the case with historical events, and especially in the field of armed conflict, the actual reality is quite a bit more complicated than that. And the fact of the matter is, which Parshall and Tully do a great job of unpacking, is that the Kido Butai, the Japanese carrier task force under the command of Admiral Nagumo, those guys were really living on borrowed time, and they were not as effective a force, not nearly as effective, as they had been 6 months previous at Pearl Harbor. All 4 of the carriers they brought to the fight that day at Midway were rather drastically undermanned compared to their full complement that they had had a few months before in terms of planes and pilots and shipboard personnel. The fitness of their men and the condition of their equipment left a lot to be desired because they had been going pedal to the metal for over half a year at this point. And yeah, they'd been defeating everybody in their path and conquering vast swaths of territory, but you can't conduct offensive military operations, especially naval operations, for that length of time without eventually having to pay a heavy price for it. when you don't take the time to rest and refit and re-equip and replace the men you have lost through attrition in the previous battles. But the Kido Butai went into Midway not having done really any of that. Pearl Harbor was a decisive tactical victory for their side, as we all know, but even still, they lost a not insignificant number of planes and pilots on that day. Coral Sea had been a tactical draw and probably a modest strategic victory from the Japanese perspective, but they lost, again, a not insignificant number of planes and pilots that day too, in addition to their 2 carriers that got sent to the bottom for the loss of 2 carriers of our own. But they went into Midway, which they viewed as being the decisive battle that would vanquish the Americans and make Japan the permanent master of the Western Pacific, without replacing any of those losses. And the guys they still had left in the air and on the ships, they were exhausted. They were running on fumes, which obviously degrades your combat effectiveness. And it's not a good condition to be in when you are about to instigate an action where you're basically pushing all your chips to the center of the table and going all in on this hand, where if this thing doesn't go the way you want it to go, the inescapable result of that is that your side is going to lose the damn war. And the other big problem the Japanese had was their commanding officer, Admiral Nagumo. He was the wrong man for the job in terms both of experience and temperament. He was the wrong man for the job at Pearl Harbor, which is why, even though that day was a magnificent tactical victory for Japan, it was also at the same time a strategic blunder of the most disastrous proportions, because Nagumo got cold feet and refused to launch the 3rd wave of the attack, despite the fact that the first 2 waves hadn't really done anything but to sink a few 30-year-old obsolete dreadnought battleships and destroy some outdated aircraft on the ground. The oil tanks and the infrastructure were left almost completely untouched, which was supposed to be the focus of the 3rd wave of the attack. And Nagumo decided he wanted to just go home with his glorious tactical victory and not risk having it tainted in any way by launching a 3rd wave that the Americans were now prepared to deal with, which might have resulted in heavy Japanese losses and to make him look like less of a conquering hero and brilliant military mastermind in the newspapers back home. And in between Pearl Harbor and Midway, that becomes a serious problem for Admiral Yamamoto. He knows Nagumo screwed the pooch at Pearl Harbor by not launching the 3rd wave and knocking out any of the infrastructure. He knows this guy is the wrong man for that job and the upcoming job. But now he can't replace the guy because he's a national military hero and everybody loves him. On the American side, yeah, we did crack their naval code, and it did enable us to gain some valuable insights into the enemy's intentions. But the amount of their stuff that we could actually read word for word was not anywhere close to 100%, probably closer to 20 or 25. There were still a hell of a lot of things where we had to wind up taking a guess, and as it happens, nearly all of our guesses wound up being the right ones. And sure, we had 2 of our carriers sunk at Coral Sea and 1 more at Midway, but here's where the overwhelming superiority of American industrial capacity comes into the equation and carries the day. In the remainder of the war after Midway, Japan launches a total of 2 more aircraft carriers, which were not even purpose-built carriers. They were cruiser hulls already under construction that they hastily stapled a flight deck on top of because the exigencies of the war demanded it. On the American side, we built, start to finish, and launched 24 Essex-class aircraft carriers between Midway and the end of the war. So 3 years and 3 months, in other words, for an average of 1 brand new aircraft carrier every 45 days, for those fans keeping score at home. But even taking all of that into consideration, we could still be living in a rather profoundly different world today if things had gone differently at Midway on the 4th of June, 1942. Another aspect of the standard narrative of that day, and another thing that Parshall and Tully do a good job of dissembling in the book, is that the Aleutian Islands operation, where the Japanese invaded Attu and Kiska Islands on the day before their attack on Midway, is that was a purely diversionary operation designed to elicit a response where we would dispatch a couple of carrier groups up to Alaska and thus cause ourselves to be shorthanded. on the next day when Midway was attacked. But that's pretty much a lot of nonsense. They conducted the Aleutian operation because they really wanted to take and hold those islands. If you take Midway, sure, you push the U.S. Pacific Fleet all the way back to Hawaii, but our ships, and especially our submarines, can still operate out of the Aleutians and come down from the north and harass the Japanese supply lines and degrade their ability to keep the new garrison they now have at Midway supplied. But if Japan holds Midway and Attu and Kiska, they can maintain a screen of submarines all along their new perimeter of conquest. And if they successfully consolidate those gains and they take the time they need to rest and refit and re-equip, maybe they can even credibly threaten to launch an all-out invasion of Hawaii. And maybe, just maybe, the U.S. government decides, you know what? Maybe it's time we should sue for peace. Let's tell Japan they can be the master of the Western Pacific and we won't give them a hard time. Just as long as they get the hell out of Alaska. And I like this video. That's all I've written on that. Let's go back to the comments. I missed a lot of comments here. Give me a moment. Welcome to everyone here who showed up while I was doing that segment, by the way. And if anyone has any observations or questions while I'm doing these segments, while my eyes are on the camera, do feel free to let us know, and the producer will curate them and bring them to my attention if I don't read them in real time. I'm going to get situated for the next segment here. Producer, do you want to cue up the Fermi Paradox background video? There we go. I guess it's kind of a weird segue going from World War II to extrasolar intelligence, but you know how it is. Now, most of you watching this probably already have a vague understanding, at least, or a specific understanding of what the Fermi Paradox is. But for those uninitiated, here's a quick primer. Enrico Fermi, the eminent nuclear physicist, veteran of the Manhattan Project, was walking to lunch one day in the summer of 1950 with a few of his colleagues, Edward Teller, Herbert York, Emil Konopinski. They got to talking about the recent reports that were flying around at that time about unidentified flying object, a term that had only entered the lexicon within the last 2 or 3 years. And there was much speculation, both in the press and the general public, about whether the Earth was being visited by space aliens, a question that still dominates much of our discourse here in the present day. The discussion among Fermi and his friends, it then turned toward the feasibility of faster-than-light travel, because if these are alien spacecraft we're seeing, that people are seeing, unless they're coming from Mars, and that was still an open question in 1950, then they have to be coming from a different star system. And if c, the speed of light, if that's a hard and fast speed limit that governs all objects and information in the universe, and we have no reason to think it isn't, then it would require vast, almost incomprehensible expenditures of time and energy for an interstellar intelligence to fly a spaceship all the way to our little planet, only to hover around for a while and freak us all out and then fly the hell away again. But Fermi's mind was going to a different place altogether at this point. He gets to thinking, if the galaxy is teeming with planets and teeming with technological civilizations, then even with the telescopes that we have here in 1950, we should be able to observe some evidence that such civilizations exist, but we don't see any such evidence. And then he blurts out, so where is everybody? And the Fermi Paradox is thus born. And it's not even really a paradox per se, more of a thought experiment, but that's not important because Fermi Paradox sounds really cool, and that's still what we call it. As well we should. Now, dozens of books have been written. Hundreds and hundreds of YouTube videos exist talking about potential solutions to this paradox. Some YouTube channels you may be a fan of, they talk about very little else but solutions to the Fermi paradox. And we have to start, obviously, with a corpus of known facts, some of which were unknown to Fermi when he posed the question in 1950. Number one, there are billions of sun-like stars in the Milky Way. Number two, there's a high probability that some or all of those stars have rocky Earth-like planets orbiting them. And in Fermi's day, this was just a probability and not a certainty. The existence of extrasolar planets was not definitively proved until I myself was a teenager in 1987. But now we know for a fact that all stars have planets, at least all the stars we've studied. Number three, there are many sun-like stars that are older than the sun, thus their planets are older than our planet is. So there ought to have been sufficient time for any civilizations on those planets to have become technological and or spacefaring. Number four, some fraction of those spacefaring civilizations may have developed the means of interstellar travel. Not necessarily faster than light travel, but interstellar travel is perfectly feasible if you want to do it bad enough with sufficient resources of time and energy. Number five, even without faster than light travel, it should take a sufficiently advanced spacefaring civilization only a few million years to colonize an entire galaxy. And number six, in light of number 1 through 5, it seems highly probable that Earth ought to have been visited by such civilizations, or at least by their remote probes during that time. But even here in the third decade of the 21st century, with our vastly improved observational capabilities compared to what existed in Fermi's day, we can still discern no evidence of such a thing ever happening. Now, everybody has their favorite pet solution for this thing, or set of solutions. The rare earth hypothesis is a popular one, which posits that maybe complex life just isn't as common as we might be inclined to think it is. And in our own case here on Earth, it's certainly true that there were a whole series of serendipitous, seemingly random events that had to happen for us to exist in the first place, and then become technological, and then become a spacefaring species, starting with the impact event that resulted in our unusually large moon and our 22.5-degree axial tilt. If our moon was 10% less massive, or our axial tilt was half a degree more or less, things would look rather vastly different than they do. And there were further impact events, of course, that resulted in high-energy fossil fuels being relatively abundant right below our planet's surface and accessible enough that we could access them and figure out how to use them to make ourselves into a technological species and then a spacefaring one. Currently, the most popular theory among the scientists who study this stuff seems to be that the galaxy is most likely teeming with probiotic life forms, but not the eukaryotic multicellular life forms that eventually evolved into things like you and me. But I'm not really sure I buy into that thinking. I think there's one thing that very often gets overlooked or discounted in these discussions, and that is the thickness of our planet's atmosphere. I think the galaxy might be overflowing with intelligent life, technological life even, but many of them just may not have fossil fuel resources that are as good as ours. Or they might have atmospheres that are too thick to permit the jump to being a spacefaring civilization. If our atmosphere was 5% thicker, we would not be able to launch rockets or satellites into orbit. If it was 5% thinner, we would have a very difficult time flying airplanes, because your atmospheric gases have to be substantial enough to create lift under the wings of the thing you're flying, which is exactly why it's been so difficult landing spacecraft on Mars, because there's not enough of an atmosphere to slow the thing down in the traditional manner that we do such things here on Earth. So you need a combination of giant parachutes and really powerful retro rockets to land the thing safely. And there are dozens or hundreds or thousands of other explanations that people have for why we have not detected life elsewhere. Not just within our own galaxy, but even in other galaxies, because theoretically, if somebody in another galaxy had made the jump all the way to being a Kardashev Type 3 civilization, even from the remove of being in a different galaxy, we should be able to see the structures they've built in order to harness the energy from all their stars, because given sufficient millions or billions of years, a sufficiently advanced civilization should be able not only to colonize an entire galaxy, but to harness the energy of every star they're in. And within our own galaxy, we should be able to see, if they exist or if they have existed, similar structures, Dyson spheres and Dyson swarms and so on, that in the example of a Kardashev Type 2 civilization, which is where a civilization can harness all of the energy output of the star that its planet orbits, we should be able to see that. It should be relatively obvious from where we are with the observational capabilities that we have today. But for some reason, we can't see any of it. And of course, the rare earth hypothesis, which is a pretty popular one among scientists, it stipulates that maybe life just isn't as common as we want it to be. And there's also the firstborn hypothesis, which posits that maybe we are the first technological civilization that ever existed in our galaxy. And it's certainly a possibility. We don't have really any reason to say it's not. We would like there to be lots of life elsewhere. It seems kind of freaky if we are the only ones or the first ones, but we have no evidence-based means of discounting it. And the fact that we can't see anything anywhere that appears artificial, it would seem to support that theory. All right, let's check the comments. Yes, Mr. Squatch is in the YouTube penalty box currently. He did a naughty. But I think they're letting him out of the box before next Sunday, so we can all breathe a sigh of relief on that score. And I think I'm just going to jump straight to the next segment. If there are no is there something to be said about silicon life? That is an interesting question, and I'm not exactly sure what I think about that, because it seems like, you know what? Let me rephrase that. If silicon-based life exists, I think the likelihood would probably be that it was created by carbon-based life, the thing we are. And I think also that if and when we do encounter alien life, it's just as likely, if not more so, that it's a machine civilization as opposed to a biological civilization, because I think there is a pretty good chance that, given sufficient time and energy and technology, that may be one of the jumps that life makes, that civilization makes. You have the jump from prokaryotic to eukaryotic, and then to complex biology, and then you have the jump to primates, and the jump to civilization, and the jump to technology, and the jump to spacefaring technology. And perhaps the next jump after that is the jump from biological life to machine life. And if a species made that jump, from biological to machine, I would think almost certainly that it would be silicon based, because look at how much of our technology is silicon based. Nearly all of our top technology, or of our most advanced technologies, are silicon based in one way or another. Faster than light, I'm not sure about. I think there certainly are loopholes in general relativity that permit faster than light travel. The Alcubierre drive is a good example, but in order to achieve the thing, it requires just astronomical, almost incomprehensible amounts of energy that you have to harness. And you would almost have to be a Kardashev type 2 civilization in order to even think about being able to do that. Like you would have to harness the not just the whole energy output of your planet, but the whole energy output of your parent star. And even then, you might only be able to make short hops in terms of getting to a place like to a Star Trek type place, where the average spaceship has a warp drive and you can just zip around from one corner of the galaxy to the other corner and back again. I find that all pretty inconceivable, frankly. Yeah. Or the AI question, as you bring up, but is that really life? And there we get into the realm of that being a question for the philosophers rather than the astronomers and the biologists. But I do think that if and when we discover definitive, non-disprovable evidence of an extrasolar civilization existing, it's almost a certitude that it will be us discovering their trash. And and I think there's a good possibility that, tying back into Dr. Loeb's theory about Oumuamua, that object, if it is a space probe, it might not necessarily even be an active one. It might be a thing that's been defunct for millions or billions of years, just hanging around at the local standard of rest, and each time there it is, there's our guy. See, have you ever seen an asteroid that looked like a butt plug? I have not myself. So it's difficult to envisage that and then there it is. It swings close to the sun and it gets its little gravitational slingshot right there. And then it goes off in a different direction. And there's where it should have been. And I think it's about a 10% difference in acceleration. The Newtonian mechanics say that it should go in a certain direction and have a certain amount of acceleration, but this thing didn't do that. And we have no satisfactory explanation for why it didn't behave according to the laws of physics that have governed everything we know about space flight and orbital mechanics since the 17th century. And I think Dr. Loeb is right that we shouldn't be too hesitant to dismiss the explanation that it might be some sort of artificial object, because that might very well be the theory that best fits the fact pattern of the things we know. And nobody should be written off as a crank or a UFO loony, especially not a man as eminent and well qualified as that, just for posing the question. There is nothing wrong with posing questions. That is supposed to be the thing that science is all about. Science doesn't get done without people asking weird questions and proposing exotic, perhaps esoteric explanations for why we observe the things we observe. Yeah, I would have a hard time ever calling AI real life. I mean, not to the extent that AI exists today, just as a means of writing really terrible term papers and bad monologues for my YouTube channel. I did think that monologue that ChatGPT wrote for me was pretty entertaining though. Hey Ben Grimm, how's it going? Good to see you. Thanks for coming. It's just me flying solo this week. Squatch is in the penalty box. And my green screen broke in half. That was fun. Just as I was about to go on the air, right after I taped it. Maybe I'll post that as a blooper video. So, you should be giggling. It was funny as hell. You raise a good point, Swiss Miss, and like I said in the segment, I think it's regrettable how scientific groupthink isn't all that much different or all that much less odious than it was 500 years ago in Galileo's day. And it makes it all the more laughable that so many people want us to live in a technocracy where we venerate people with certain qualifications and certain types of degrees, and they tell us that we must never question these people. We have to always trust their judgment and do whatever they say, and that's nonsense, because there is no group of people, no kind of qualifications, no type of university degree that makes a group of people not be prone to groupthink and bias and all of the defects and personality problems that afflict every single other group of people. And if we left it to professional scientists to do all the science, good science would never get done. It's true of history as well. If we left history to the professional historians, we wouldn't know jack shit about history. Amateur historians do just as much of the work, and their work is often more valuable than the work of the professional historians is. Because there is always that problem of people who are cloistered in the university faculty lounge, and that's the only world they know, and things that come out of the university faculty lounge do not originate in the real world and are often nonsense. And I think we see that more evidently every single day, because much of our public policy these days has originated in the university faculty lounge, and that's a serious problem, and it's causing in some ways the wholesale breakdown of civil society, I would submit. Yeah, it probably is most likely that if it's a probe, it's a defunct probe. But wouldn't it be great if it wasn't? And there still obviously is a possibility that there are probes in our solar system that might have been present and operating for millions or billions of years, and they're just sufficiently tiny that we haven't detected them yet. And they might renew themselves by being able to 3D print their own replacement components when they wore out. But wouldn't it be great if there was a probe sitting out there somewhere that has high definition video of dinosaurs and the Roman Empire and everything in our history that we wish we had photographs and videos of? It might all exist, just floating around in space out there. And how awesome would that be? And yeah, that's Ben. That is what one would one would think, because that's what comets do. They get close to the sun, and then they outgas, and that makes them accelerate. But they were watching this thing with a fine-toothed comb, and they never saw any sort of the outgassing that you would expect if it was a cometary object. And I'm going to we haven't done the Oumuamua segment yet, and we're already talking about Oumuamua, so I might as well do that bit, don't you think? And I just hate saying Oumuamua. Maybe that's just me. All right, bear with me. Feel like I should hum a song. Oh, speaking of that, y'all like that thumbnail or what? That's the thumbnail for when the big guy comes around, the new Johnny Cash parody. Speaking of Johnny Cash parodies, the first Johnny Cash parody just hit 250,000 views. Producer, could we play Hunter Biden's Cocaine Blues, please, while I'm getting this next segment queued up? Can you do that on short notice? Pretty happy with that thumbnail, by the way. If you can believe it, it took way, way longer to do the letters than it did to do the photograph. Hello, I'm Johnny Curmudgeon. There it is. I think we've got no sound, producer. It's not just you, the sound went from me too. Then I was awakened. Hello, I'm Johnny Curmudgeon. Early one morning while making the rounds, I took a shot of cocaine, then I laid back down. I kept doing coke until my face got red, then called the local hooker and she gave me head. Got up next morning and I grabbed my gun, took a couple selfies, then away I run. Made a good run till I run out of blow and passed out in my car in San Antonio. Then I was awakened in a Texas jail. They made me take a drug test, which I promptly failed. The sheriff and the judge, they said, this looks real bad. Then I said, fuck you assholes, I'm calling my dad. I said, yes, oh yes, my name is Hunter B. And you two dickheads best be nice to me. Once I get my pops involved, I'll have you know that both you fools will end up in Guantanamo. When they did release me, I was dressed in black. I left that jail and set about to score some crack. I scored some crack and hit the nudie bar. Knocked up a random stripper, then I stole her car. Early next morning, about 9:30, I spied the Secret Service coming down the line. The lead agent coughed and then he looked real sad. He said, "Come on, you sloppy loser, let's go see your dad." Into the Oval Office I was led. When father saw me, he commenced to shake his head. He said, "Son, I love you, but this has to stop. I already can't keep track how many grandkids I got." In about 5 minutes, in walked a man, holding some note cards in his right hand. He said, "Sir, the press want you to go explain what you and this damn crackhead did in the Ukraine." Daddy left and went outside with much ado, looking like the Reverend from Poltergeist 2. I figured I should do myself a little boom, but I left my stash outside the Situation Room. Come on, you gotta listen unto me. Lay off those strippers and let that cocaine be. 250,000 views, ladies and gentlemen. Just saying. That video has twice as many likes as any of my other videos have views. But hey, what's cool is when you can go on vacation for 10 days and never even open up YouTube one time, and you've got one video giving the channel sufficient backbone that you don't have to worry about everything crashing down to zero by the time you get home. That was pretty gratifying. All right, I'm ready for Oumuamua. That's what she said. And I still hate the name Oumuamua, as I mentioned a moment ago. It just sounds silly when you say it. I'm sorry. It's not meant as an affront to native Hawaiians or the Hawaiian language. I know the thing was discovered in a Hawaiian observatory, and we're just not allowed to name cosmic objects after Greek and Roman mythological figures anymore because that's not diverse and inclusive enough or whatever. I just find it pretty damn impossible to say Oumuamua without sounding like a freaking dork, but that's my own damn problem, I guess. That being said, Oumuamua, as you may know, is the first interstellar object to visit our solar system that we have actually discovered and observed. There have doubtless been hundreds or thousands, even millions of other such objects that have passed through down the history of our solar system. But we either didn't yet have the capacity to detect them, or we did have the capacity and they just got missed. Because it's damned easy among all the other objects in the neighborhood to miss one thing, especially when the thing might even only be 100 or a couple hundred feet long. And Oumuamua only ever got noticed because it was traveling at such a rate of speed that it couldn't possibly be gravitationally bound to the sun or to any of the planets. Even long-period comets, as fast as those things go, and as big and weirdly shaped as their orbits are, they don't have anything like the velocity at which this thing was moving. But then, if Professor Avi Loeb of Harvard was here with us, he would point out that the whole idea of velocity is relative to the perspective of the observer. We all have a functional understanding of the fact that we're not stationary observers of anything because our planet is hurtling through space in orbit around the sun at a rate of 17 kilometers per second. But we still sort of innately, instinctively think of the sun itself as being an object that is stationary and unmoving, which it totally is not. It's hurtling through space in orbit around the galactic center over 10 times as fast as the Earth is orbiting around it. And Professor Loeb was really the first one to introduce that fact into the discussion about what Oumuamua might be. We know it's not a comet because it's got no tail. There was no outgassing observed when it made its slingshot around the sun, and yet some unexplained factor made it accelerate more than it should have just from the gravitational slingshot of having passed near the sun, because the math doesn't lie. This is one of those cases where Sir Isaac Newton is in the driver's seat. An object of that mass traveling at that velocity, making an approach of that distance to the sun, its acceleration and subsequent direction of travel can be reliably predicted by classical mechanics every single time. But this thing, for some reason, it defied the equations we've been relying on for over 400 years, the equations we used to get men to the moon and back. So if there's anything we're sure of, that thing ain't no comet. And it seems highly improbable that it's an asteroid either, because it throws off a light curve that is inconsistent with a round or even a roundish object. As best they can surmise, it's sort of a cigar-shaped thingy that's tumbling as it traverses through space, and that's the only way the idiosyncrasies of the light curve can be satisfactorily explained, which doesn't square very well with the fact that nobody's ever seen a damn cigar-shaped asteroid. But wait, says Dr. Loeb, maybe we need to permit some more esoteric explanations to enter into our thinking. And so he wrote a book a few years ago called Interstellar, in which he puts forward the theory that this thing perhaps might be an artificial space probe that's being driven by a light sail. He's not saying that definitively, mind you. He just thinks it's a possibility that ought to be explored. But that has earned him a lot of enmity and opprobrium and tutting from his colleagues in the astronomy profession, because you are just not supposed to propose non-natural explanations for anything, or else you are some sort of raving UFO nut, which of course is total nonsense, and they should be less uptight about shit. There are three factors that support the Loeb theory, in my view, one of which is the unexplained acceleration, another of which is the bizarre light curve, and the last of which is the apparent velocity at which the object was moving when we first detected it. And all Dr. Loeb did was to say, maybe we should just give consideration to the idea that a non-natural origin better explains the observed set of characteristics than a natural one does. And just as in Galileo's day, he gets shouted down as a heretic for daring to question the established orthodoxy, because there is nothing new under the sun, no pun intended, and some things just never change. I still haven't actually read the book, but I've heard Dr. Loeb discuss what's in the book at fairly great length. And while I found the bits about the acceleration and the light curve certainly very compelling, it's his argument about the local standard of rest that fascinated me the most as a layman, a mere aficionado of popular astronomy. It's something that never would have occurred to me if he hadn't brought it up. And it has to do with the fact that, as I mentioned before, from our perspective, we are hurtling through space around a stationary sun, but that's actually far from the reality. In point of fact, while from our perspective it looked like Oumuamua came in and zipped through our neighborhood and then zipped back out, in actual fact, we actually zipped through its neighborhood. In relation to the galactic core, it is the more stationary object and not the sun and the planets. And that's, to me, the real intellectual crux of Dr. Loeb's argument, because he's saying that if you were a civilization from some other star system and you wanted to deploy a probe to study as many other star systems as possible, you might have the thing behave exactly like Oumuamua did. In other words, just have it loiter in interstellar space at or near the local standard of rest, and each time a solar system passes near it, just send it on a loop around that star and observe all its planets on the way out, and then return to the place you were loitering until the next star system happens to go by. And honestly, I don't understand why the scientific establishment is so very reluctant and resistant to out-of-the-box thinking, because didn't out-of-the-box thinking give us every great scientific theory and discovery that there ever was? I think it would be perfectly well worth the investment to prepare some sort of spacecraft that could be launched on short notice the next time we happen to detect an Oumuamua-like object, just to follow it and see where it goes and what it does. The theory could be definitively proved or disproved pretty easily that way, and then boom, there's the answer to the Fermi Paradox. And it's the greatest discovery in human history if the thing winds up being artificial. And even if it's just some weird natural object, you can gather data on it that you couldn't gather any other way. So people should stop giving Dr. Loeb such a hard time, damn it. All right, can you check for comments? Yeah, Squatch, you're right. the acceleration was 8% more than it should have been, according to Newtonian mechanics. And when you see no observed outgassing, that is a very, very difficult thing to explain. Lucy says, I think it's quite possible this could be some ancient man technology and it's trying to feel us out. Yeah, it could be ancient and it could still be operational, or it might be long defunct, and it could, if Loeb's theory is correct, and it just sort of loiters in a certain spot at the local standard of rest, and then each time a star system passes, it just sort of automatically, according to the laws of gravity, does a loop around the star and then slingshots back to where it was. And it could be a representative of a civilization that died out millions or billions of years ago, but it might have the ability to self-replicate, because we all know what the potential implications of 3D printing are. With 3D printing, you can potentially send a probe out and have it remain viable and operational forever, and have it just 3D print its own replacement components, which it would continue doing long after the people or the aliens who launched it were, long after their civilization died out and became defunct, indefinitely, even if it's able to gather the materials for its own replication just from the hydrogen atoms it encounters in interstellar space, for example. You're right, Swissness. If they can't provide a natural explanation on the acceleration, they should be quiet, and you're being courteous. And it's a case where the natural explanations are almost more implausible than an artificial explanation. And that's one of the points that Dr. Loeb is trying to make. And he's saying that why should we shut ourselves off just because we're squeamish about being called UFO believers from an explanation that better fits the set of known facts than any artificial explanation does? And the light curve and the acceleration, those are both real problems, because neither of those things can be satisfactorily explained by any of the knowledge that we currently have about the objects that we have ever observed that are natural objects. You know, if it's a cigar-shaped asteroid, how the hell did it get to be cigar-shaped? And if it's accelerating more than classical mechanics say it should accelerate, without any observed outgassing, why the hell is it doing that? It's a good question, Squatch, about the 8%. And we're getting fairly out of my depth there. I'm just a guy who does math for a living. I don't know anything about it. But the 8% is, everybody is perplexed by it, and they should be, because classical mechanics don't lie. You know, we know the mass of the object. We know how gravity works. We know how gravitational slingshots work. That's the way we got both of the Voyagers out to the fringes of the solar system. by gravitationally slingshotting them around the inner planets, and then around, in one of the Voyager's cases, around Jupiter, and that's how we got it out to Uranus and Neptune. We did the same thing with New Horizons. Oh, speaking of New Horizons, I just heard the other day that they're defunding New Horizons, and I don't like that very much at all. New Horizons, the mission that took all the photographs of Pluto and the moons of Pluto, and is now traversing the Kuiper Belt and the Oort cloud. I don't want to defund that mission, and it's only costing us around $10 million a year. And for all the reasons that I don't like the federal government, the NASA's unmanned space program is one thing about the federal government that I absolutely love, and they've done pretty much flawless work for the last about 25 years. And especially with the James Webb Space Telescope coming online, and there's a couple of terrestrial telescopes that are going to be coming online in the next couple of years, where we might discover objects out in that neighborhood in the Kuiper Belt and the Oort cloud that we might very much like to examine, and New Horizons might be able to do it. And it would really be a hell of a bummer if we found something like that and we had a spacecraft in a position where it could be done, but oh well, we cut off funding 2 years ago, so we can't do it. And when the hell are we going to have another spacecraft in a similar position? It won't be during any of our lifetimes. So I think that's a hell of a bad reason to save $10 million a year. You know, for all the nonsense that we spend $10 million on, we can't save $10 million for that. For something that's actually important and instructive, and a mission that has... Who doesn't love those pictures of Pluto? Those are fantastic pictures. Pluto looks cooler than anybody ever imagined Pluto looking. I'm going to catch up on the comments here for a moment. Someone feel free to hum a song. Or, Squatch, why don't you play another curmudgeon song while we're at it? How about the Hank Williams one? I like that one. Well, my bucket's got a hole in it. Yeah, my baggy's got a hole in it. Yeah, my baggy's got a hole in it. I can't buy no blow. Well, I'm standing on a corner with my willie in my hand. I'm waiting for a hooker with some big old cans, 'cause my baggy's got a hole in it. Yeah, my baggy's got a hole in it. Yeah, my baggy's got a hole in it. I can't buy no blow. Well, I went up to the White House. I met my dad, Joey B. I told him, Daddy, I done caused another pregnancy, 'cause my rubber's got a hole in it. Yeah, my rubber's got a hole in it. Yeah, my rubber's got a hole in it. It's off to court I go. Well, there ain't no use of me getting so hard when all the streetwalkers Bankers won't take my credit card 'cause my baggy's got a hole in it. Yeah, my baggy's got a hole in it. Yeah, my baggy's got a hole in it. I can't buy no clothes. Yeah, my baggy's got a hole in it. Yeah, my baggy's got a hole in it. Yeah, my baggy's got a hole in it. I can't buy no clothes. Has anybody here? Oh, the thumbnail, by the way, is that's for when the big guy comes around. I know it's been a while since the last song, or the last parody at any rate. But ooh, libs of TikTok. Turn the sound up. Let's watch some libs of TikTok.
Long day educating the world's youth, and I need it. But like, if anyone else tired of this like audio that's like, what's not clicking, Steven? Like, I'm over it, especially when white women do it. Like, I'm just so tired of seeing white women use audios on TikTok that are like clearly given to us by the Black community, by Black content creators, and like no credit given, no recognition of like where this originated. Like, the amount of clout that white women have gotten off the backs of Black content creators is unreal. Imagine a world where Addison Rae could only use content made by white people. Like, that bitch would be a bum. And let me just be clear, I use the word bitch in a very loving term. Like, I don't think Addison Rae is a bitch, okay? I don't even know her. This is the internet. But what I'm saying is, like, if white content creators only used audios and, you know, challenges that were created by other white content creators, I don't think that this app would have as many white content creators with millions of followers and millions of dollars. Like, the amount of money and notoriety these people have is honestly credited almost solely to Black content creators. Okay, I had no idea that I had changed the speed of the audio, and now like I went back and watched it, and it's embarrassing. But I'm gonna keep it because like I got through a lot of points in a small amount of time, so we're going with it. I don't mean this to come across like I'm saying white people should stick to white people shit and Black people should stick to Black people shit. Like, that sounds really divisive, and that's really not what I'm trying to say. Oh, you think? But it just kind of speaks to the privilege that white people have, that anything that they want, they just take for themselves and use for their benefit.
Can we talk about how it's actually horrifying that the Kardashians went out of their way to have kids with Black men just so that they could have a closer proximity to Black culture, just so that when you call them out on appropriating Black culture, they bring up their proximity to Black people and their half Black children. They bred their children like dogs. And as a Black woman, you cannot change my opinion on this. And I know a lot of other Black women and mixed Black women feel the same way, that eventually at some point in their life, these kids will grow up and realize that one of the main reasons their parents had them is so that they could have a closer proximity to Black culture. It's going to be a horrifying moment for those kids.
Wow.
This behind me is St. George's Wharf in London.
I find it outstanding that my friend thinks I want to go to lunch with my other friend who is Latina.
Latina.
To Trump.
Not Latina, Latina.
My friend was like, it's just a matter of difference of opinion. Difference of opinion? No. It's about right or wrong. It's about having morals or not having
Swiss Miss, thanks for coming.
Difference of opinion is I prefer scrambled eggs with cheese. And you prefer eggs over easy. That's a difference of opinion. You know what? Any choice is fine. It doesn't hurt anyone. But choosing Trump, which is actually hurtful to people, and especially people of color, absolutely not. Not ready to forgive. I don't know how you guys feel about it, and how are you guys doing with your friendships? Let me know.
Why does it matter?
Oh, it doesn't matter to you. But to me, I'm a man.
Oh, I know this one.
Okay?
Okay.
So, what are you? So I can call you sir or ma'am. What are you?
What would you assume looking at me?
What are you?
What would you assume looking at me?
I assume that you're a man. Okay? Okay?
Thank you. Whatever.
Many people ask me, how do you use they, them pronouns for a singular person? Well, it's really easy. All you have to do is use it the same way that you would talk about a group of people. So for example, I, Addison, use they, them pronouns. In that case, you talk about me like this. I know Addison. They are amazing. Their dress and their hair are amazing. And I'm so proud to know them. Now, a fun fact about they, them pronouns is that they've been used in a singular context for centuries. Even going back to Shakespearean times, there's actual documentation and literature using they and them in singular contexts.
Yeah, I bet this dude knows a lot of Shakespeare.
Pronoun, I'll leave you with this piece of information. Our language is constantly changing and adapting. We're evolving to find new terms and language to self-identify. So get with the times. Don't be an asshole.
Yeah, I think I'll be an asshole.
The reason we have so much discrimination in the world today is because you feed your children animal products. From birth, we're taught that certain animals, like pets, should be loved and cared for, but then these animals over here, cows, pigs, chickens, and fish, should be tortured and murdered. We don't question these sorts of things when we're taught this as a child. If you're told a lie enough times, it becomes your reality. Teaching this to kids is the root of all discrimination that we see in the world. Just imagine if we taught our children to treat all animals fairly and not to treat certain beings or species differently just because they might look a bit different from us or they're not as intelligent. If we teach humans not to discriminate based on species, we would 100% see far less discrimination amongst our own species as humans. People always say that we should worry about our own species before we start worrying about the animals, but we've got it all backwards. Let's stop indoctrinating our future generations to discriminate between species, and then maybe we can fix some of the things that we see between humans today.
I got cornered by 3 of my 6th grade students at lunch today, and they came up to me all excited. They were like, Miss Collins, what's your sexuality? And I said, why do you need to know that right now? And they were like, oh, I don't know. I just think you'd be like a super fun, like bi or pan person. And I said, well, I don't really know how much I'm allowed to talk about this to students, but does looking at my shoelaces help?
Nope.
And these kids just flipped out. They were so excited.
Okay, now we have to listen to Get Off My Lawn Blues because there's a line in that song that's just about her. I know you've all seen it already, but forgive me for self-aggrandizing. The music video remix, if you please.
Waters were muddy, back when the big wolf howled, when John Wayne cocked his carbine and told the bad guys get out of town, when Goyle was Goyle and boys was boys, just like Archie Bunker sang, and a man was free to think unfashionably without getting his damn self hanged. If you can't see it's all gone wrong, get off my lawn. Get off my lawn. You got a house and you got a spouse, you got a kid or 2 or 3. You wanna send them to a decent school to learn math and history. They come home speaking woke stories. If you object, they call you a hick. And the teachers
There it is.
are all a bunch of purple-haired, lit-pierced lunatics. If that's the kind of trip you're on, get off my lawn. Get off my lawn. You got vagrants digging in your trash can. There's junkies cooking up in the bar. Can't walk, you got say the hell with Tony's needle. He'll have to stick it in my dead arm. Then we give a fucking $100 billion away to some douche in a muscle shirt. And they tell us that the man we gotta respect is some pervert wearing a skirt. If you're a lady with a 10-inch dong, get off my lawn. Get off my lawn. You spend your life playing by the rules, show up early, work real hard, do all the things you're supposed to do, and get your hands all bruised and scarred. What does it get you? What do you gain? Holding up your end of the deal when your country's being run by some sleazy crooks who don't give a damn how you feel. You bastards only know how to steal. Get off my lawn. Get off my lawn. Now I'm a simple man, simple taste, and I'm singing a simple song. You can listen and not, but there's gonna be a reckoning before. You can fool some people some of the time, just like old Abel Lincoln said. But you try and fool everybody all the time. We're gonna take you to the woodshed. So till the moment my ass drops dead, get off my lawn. Get off my lawn.
Get off my lawn.
I think y'all are gonna like the new Cash parody tomorrow. Pretty pleased with the lyrics. Squatch has seen them. Although I still need to figure out something to do to sufficiently gravel up my voice to do late period Cash. Let's go back to the libs of TikTok.
I wear a mask to school.
Oh God, I know this one too.
School. Hi ho the Dario. I wear a mask to school. It helps to keep me safe. It helps to keep me safe. Hi ho the Dario. It helps to keep me safe. It keeps my friends safe. It keeps my friends safe. Hi ho the Dario. It keeps my friends safe. And let me
If you
see.
don't think this is child abuse, you're a crazy person.
So I came out as non-binary a little over a year ago. When I started interviewing for jobs, I was still in the closet about my gender identity. I was also dating a guy at the time and was afraid to come out because he was straight. Well, that relationship ended, and after I got a job and moved out to Seattle, and after I saw how accepting my district was, I finally became open about being non-binary. I do get a lot of questions from students at the beginning of the semester.
No, you don't.
I answer those very honestly. When we do class introductions, I have everyone include their pronouns, and I talk about why it matters. And I always encourage students to ask questions if they don't quite understand, because I know to a lot of those students, I'm probably the first non-binary teacher they've ever had. I always assume good intent with my students, so if someone makes a joke or cracks a comment, then I use it as an opportunity to educate them. Patience and love are key.
And the teachers and the principal are all a bunch of purple-haired, lip-pierced lunatics.
Mask mandate was lifted and I am fully vaccinated because you don't know me. You don't know that about me. I apologize. To the man at Starbucks who got offended when I yelled, "Oh my God, I'm not a fucking Republican. I'm so sorry. I believe in science." I'm not sorry. To my mom, who I was on the phone with, I'm sorry I said fucking.
I am so tired of catering to cis people's feelings. Because I do. I do it every time I go to a restaurant and the server says, "Hi, ladies," and I don't correct them. Every time I choose the women's washroom because people expect that of me and it makes them comfortable. Every time I go to the grocery store and ignore being called miss or ma'am. Every time a close friend misgenders me and my immediate response is to say, no, it's okay as long as you're trying. It's not okay. And I'm not okay, because in order for any of you to even entertain the idea of respecting my existence, I have to water down all of my emotions lest I live up to the whiny crybabies trans stereotype that you all have in your heads. Because God forbid you take someone seriously when they are showing valid emotion.
No one gives a shit about your emotions, lady.
That straight people have taken the incredibly complex and nuanced thing that is the queer experience and stolen it, oversimplified it, bastardized it, commodified it, and then they try to straight-splain it back to us as if they know more about it than we do.
Straight-splain, I like that.
Either entirely invisible or shove our identities into neat little stereotypes that they can easily digest in order for them to take us seriously. I hate having to infantilize and handhold straight people constantly in order to reduce the chances of a temper tantrum and the subsequent revocation of their support. I hate the idea of the ever patient, ever willing to teach queer that straight people seem to think encapsulates all of us. I am not your fucking encyclopedia. I am far too busy living my own life to attempt to educate you for hours on end without monetary compensation, or at least without the insistence constantly that I'm not being as nice as you want me to be. If you're so interested, do a modicum of research yourself, and if you won't even do that, you're not actually interested.
See, this is a really interesting comment because I know the commenter didn't think about really what he was saying. He just wanted to leave a hate comment, which is fine. But my question is, why is being unhealthy a bad thing? First of all, obviously not all fat people are unhealthy, but let's say they were. What is the moral issue with being unhealthy? Why does that make you a bad person? Because that's how we get to the core of fat phobia, right? There is a moral assignment with the idea of being fat, whereas we associate thinness with good and fat with bad. But why is that? Why do you think being unhealthy and being fat is bad? There needs to be a
And you wonder why we don't trust these people. It happens every single time. Every single time. This is from today. This is from today. Yeah, no. Wasn't fat rep. Was not ever fat rep.
Rosie O'Donnell, is that you?
Actors forever and only till the end of time. This is boring.
And I have to be honest with you that when they made that shit a law, I almost didn't want to do this show. So, because I wanted to punish this fucking place for allowing that to happen here. But then I remembered that it's you guys that are the fucking victims, and you deserve everything in the world. And we need to tell them to shut the fuck up.
TikTok is just a bottomless well of wonderfully edifying content, isn't it? I mean, as we all know, TikTok is a Chinese government operation designed to hollow out our culture from the inside out. And could it be doing a better job than it is? Because just look at all those people just gazing into their magic rectangles, talking about themselves and their completely idiotic feelings. I'm not even sure what to say about some of that. But anyway, we're at the hour and a half mark, so I'm going to sign off. I hope this wasn't too painful with me flying solo this week. I want to thank my anonymous producer for working behind the scenes and doing such a splendid job. I definitely owe him a favor. Stay tuned tomorrow. Hopefully, if I nail the vocal for The Big Guy Comes Around, the new Cash parody, and obviously, thank you to everyone who contributed to making the first Cash parody hit 250,000 views. It really does mean the world to me. Thanks for being here tonight. And appreciate you more than I can ever express. Have a great day and a pleasant tomorrow. See you next time. Do not comply. Get off my lawn.